and welcome to the PRmoment CEO series of interviews. I'm really very pleased to have today with us Nikhil Dey, Vice Chair of Shandwick India. Nikhil has worked not only at the corporate communication end of strategic communication, but has also been in senior leadership roles at the very top at various PR firms for well over a decade. Welcome, Nikhil.
Thank you so much, Parul. Pleasure to be here with you.
Great. Nikhil, my first question to you is that you've been having a series of industry neutral conversations across various verticals, and what are the main findings that have come to you which would help define how communication is going to be going forward in this evolving COVID age?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Parul, because I think if ever there was a time to say, I don't know with conviction, it's now. So I really think one has to be bold enough to accept for yourself that I really don't know, and hence bring the outside in. Go in search of the answers. It's perfectly fine to say I don't know as long as you follow it up with I'll find out. And I think that's the journey that I've been on, trying to bring the outside in, trying to figure out what's going on, trying to understand a little bit of what's happening. And I will qualify that this week. Literally, things are moving, or it may even be today. Things are moving so fast that what I learned maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago may not hold true today. But one thing that I do believe does hold true, and that's cut across all the sessions that I've did, is the fact that people trust people they know, and hence as communicators, while the if you're a global organization, then your global CEO is setting the direction and the tone of the message. As a communicator, the ability to take that and embed that into something that's local, something that's here and now, so that the people in my ecosystem who know me and trust me hear it from me. Um, and I'll give you an example of taking a learning like that, which is coming out from a global sort of direction and then implementing it locally. A few weeks ago, I was on a call with the head of our China operations, Dia Li, and she was sharing with us the importance of predictive analytics, right? And of course, these are all big words to bandy around. But what hit home was the example. So they had run a social media search in China around conversations that were in public domain related to going back to work as the country was coming out of lockdown. And that was fascinating for me because we are hopefully heading into some kind of a phased move away from lockdown. And I was using all my common sense to figure out what I should be guiding clients around. What should communications focus on? What are the messages that we should put out? And there are some obvious ones: workplace safety being sort of top of that, the commute, how do I get to and fro work safely? And any common sense approach will tell you those are some normal ones to go. But the number one search in China that completely threw me was people were more worried about their home environments, the RWAs, right, and how they were going to legislate or be the new police around each individual society, which would define my ability to go back to work. So as you know, I have Cookie, my little dog, and if Cookie is alone at home, how can I go back to work, right? And if they don't allow the maids to come back in, then I have a problem going back to work. Now, this was like a penny drop moment. It was like, wow, that's so powerful, so logical. And today's or yesterday's papers tell you that RWAs have been given their own license to interpret rules. So it's following the trend. So what was true there is true in India as well. So taking that cue can help a communicator frame appropriate messages for an employee base around the country in India by learning from something or bringing the outside in, as I call it, from some other country. Yeah.
That's a great insight. You know, family and friends have always been deep influences, but I think at this stage it's even more so. And the more real and close to life it is, the better the content is I think one more finding you had mentioned that has emerged.
So, and linked to that was hyperlocal communication. So literally, so if you take a learning that's true from somewhere else and then figure out how this is going to impact every city, every state, every village, and figure out how to allow the local voice, the local leader, whoever that may be. So for a global company, Valerie and I are local leaders over here, and we have voices. And then below that, there are a range of people who will have the ability to take that down forward. So one of the sessions that I hosted, there was a beautiful example of how they had taken a narrative and then actually trained their sort of factory floor workers, their factory leaders, their Salesforce leaders, who were traditionally never spokespeople, Parul, right? So, the old world of only the authorized spokespeople are allowed to communicate, completely gone. In fact, the most trusted source is probably not an authorized spokesperson. So how to authorize them, how to equip them with the skill to pass on a message, I think would be definitely one of the top learnings. Yeah.
So you're saying, the shift to the person on the front line as communicator has probably permanently happened now, as opposed to the top-down communication.
Well, again, to be true to what my learnings are, I don't know if it's permanently happened. It's true for this week or this phase, and who knows what lies ahead. But if we stay tuned to what's working now and share that around. So the second one I called out was raw and real content, right? So maybe this is not the best backdrop for me. We were discussing if I could find a better place, but this is real. This is what we can work with today. And if the intent of my sharing is rooted in trying to pass on the learnings I have, maybe my red, orange, and white background will be excused, right? So I think having that comfort is also okay. And it's not easy because my mind is tuned to showing up perfectly. My mind is tuned, like I have Cookie sitting at my feet right now, and I toyed with the idea of locking the door and keeping her out. And I said, no, this is her home, right? She is as much got the right to this space, and I shouldn't be locking her out or saying that no, you're not going to. This is so important because this is my new reality, and encouraging everybody in my company, and that's part of what I think the communicators all agreed, that finding ways to make it comfortable for people to work from home and not try and present this perfect world was another big important learning. And if you take that and then as a communicator create a campaign thought around it, right? And there were so many examples of putting the spotlight on leaders in imperfect moments, to normalize that, so that becomes the new business as unusual phase, that it's perfectly okay to not be okay or not be perfect, yet we should aspire to be as good as we can. Yeah, so I think that was the second sort of takeaway from that conversation.
Being real and true to life. As you have Cookie at your feet, I have my golden retriever hovering around, dying to join the conversation. So that's about as real as it gets. But how there are those who would argue that being real and true to life has always been there. So what has changed in this version of being real and true to life?
So the difference that I have framed it is around there was this appetite for what I call tentpole content, right? For a tentpole event, for a tentpole, this is my old phrase is, but I used to be the channel V PR manager, where I learned the meaning of tentpole. So that was sort of the hero of that quarter, right? Where it will be slick, it will be the best production quality, it would be glitz and glam. So I think that phase has moved on, partly because situations don't allow it, but also I think because that is also seen as excess, unnecessary. So I think we are in that phase right now where people say, cut the XXX out of it and just tell me what I need to hear. Plus, do it fast because I really don't have time, or I don't have the attention to waste if you don't have something useful to say. In fact, that's the third point that came out of the sessions that I was hosting. It was speak when you have something to say, right? Don't feel pressured to communicate just because everybody else is. If you have something new or interesting or novel to add to the conversation, then do so. And there's a phrase that I use to cue myself. So content has to educate, entertain, or make my life easier, right? If it's doing one of these three things, then I think it's potentially valuable, right? So yeah, so that's a good way to rein myself in sometimes when I'm communicating. Yes.
So coming to another point that you mentioned, that you're actually seeing an era of collaboration which you may not have seen. And a part of the reason it's happening is because survival is of paramount importance at this point. And that will force you to think of new collaborations. Any specific example that you came about? How did you come to this particular point?
Yes, so I think what triggered it was an article I read. Unfortunately, I can't remember who to attribute it to, but it was a very powerful thought that struck with me. It was on LinkedIn. It was on the idea of shareholder value, right? And that's been what's driven commerce till now. And then I expanded that to say that, look, from a PR person's point of view, we've always been chasing share of voice, right? So this share of voice, shareholder value have defined actions and the ways in which we have operated. But I think now is the time to share values, right? To find values that two companies share or two organizations share, people share, find a way to bring that together. And that shared value, when shared forward, is going to drive shareholder value, is going to drive share of voice. And since you asked me for an example, one early one, and that's another one, the need for speed, the fact that you have to fail forward fast and try new things. But an early example of collaboration that to me, again, outside in, I don't have proof of this, but as an observer, it appeared to be a wonderful idea, was where I saw Domino's collaborate with the ITC folks to deliver the Ashirwad Atta at my doorstep, right? So in the early days of lockdown, we were worried, would we be able to get basic staples? And this sort of handshake between two large companies, I think was pretty smart, because what did it do? It gave license for a bunch of people to move around where they may not have been if pizza is not seen as an essential. Atta is definitely seen as an essential. So if you're carrying atta to homes, you may be also allowed to deliver baked into a pizza-based form the atta, right? So one is it gave you license to operate your delivery force. The second is that it did get you some share of voice because people noticed it and it was an early example of collaboration. So you did. And I would like to think that it drove shareholder value for both organizations by keeping them relevant, resonant, and adding value to society at that point of time. So it's got PR in it, it's got PA in it. So it's got a bunch of things, but smart thinking at the right time to shake hands and say, okay, let's try it out. If it works, it'll build. If it doesn't, we will let it go and try the next thing. Yeah.
That's actually a great example. And another example I personally noticed was when newspapers got together and took out the same ad in each other's papers, traditionally rival papers. Economic Times put out an ad supporting Hindustan Times, and other papers saying, this is a time to support the industry, our newspapers are safe. So, but perhaps that was not so obvious to the general customer because they don't think of rivalries in media in that way as it may do for television news. But that was also...
that was an example. There were others also, I think, where there was the Lifebuoy example around the hand washing ad that they did, and a host of others. But it also raises an interesting point around intent of action, right? And I think for me, that's really fundamental, because brilliant ideas come and we say, okay, this will get attention, this will work. But why are you doing what you're doing? If you're doing it to genuinely help, there will always be detractors. There's never going to be an idea that everybody is going to love. So you're going to get often some bats for any new thinking. But the only defense that I can think of to hold your head high and say, I know I did it for the right reason. So if it is helping, if the collaboration is helping society, if the collaboration is helping country, if the collaboration is helping community, then you know that you're onto something that's potentially valuable. If it's only helping you sell more, then at this point of time, I'm not sure it's the right button to press. And yes, of course, the wheels of the economy have to go on and we have to continue to sell, but selling will come from helping.
Yeah. I think that brings me to another point, about kindness that you mentioned. This is a time to be kind, not only to yourself, but to everybody else. In a way, this is brands caring for their customers, putting business goals, maybe not business goals, but brand goals behind community. So do you think that that kind of approach will sustain, and we are in for that kind of approach for a while?
It's interesting. Just yesterday, I was talking to a senior communicator in the APAC region around this. and we were at divergent ends of this argument, because he was saying that, look, we've seen this happen again and again in the short or medium term. There's a lot of clamor and noise around this, but the minute things go back to normal, people will revert to normal and human nature as such. So in fact, his worry was that we are going to see we're talking about a U-shaped or a V-shaped recovery. He's saying, I think there's going to be a U-shaped or V-shaped surge back to that cutthroat competition, that relentless need to get ahead. Maybe I have rose tinted glasses, or my red shirt is reflecting in him. I genuinely believe that something fundamental in me is changing. And if I am a microcosm of the world, I don't believe I'm going to go back to the way I was. And there's this concept I came across called anti-fragility, which is different from resilience. Resilience is around bouncing back. Think of a squeezy ball. You squeeze it, put it under intense pressure, let it go. It comes back to its original frame. But what I think the world has gone through right now, we're not going to come back to that original shape. We are going to emerge in some new shape, and there will be fundamentally new behaviors for a while to come, which is the essence of what a communicator is trying to map. What's going on in the head of my consumer, of my stakeholder, and how do I now serve this new need, right? So I would like to think that we will be able to hold on to some of the pennies that have dropped right now and not go back to some of the madness that was there before. Yeah.
One final question, Nikhil. We had one round of changes, like when social media first came into the world, where communicators and had to really train CEOs and leadership to communicate to the audience online. Yeah. And some CEOs took advantage of it, some didn't, some remained behind closed doors. But now we have yet another round where, like you said, you have to show leadership in imperfect moments. People have got used to directly connecting, whether over Zoom, and this behavior might very well, of course, be here to stay. What does that mean for leadership communication, where access is expected as a normal?
I think it is the most exciting thing that has happened to me as a communicator, Parul, and I'll tell you why. Because I haven't felt like this since it was 1990 and I began my career in PR. I'm amazed at the opportunities that are opening up in front of me to try new things, to do new things. In fact, for the first time last week, I was on a Zoom call with a CEO sitting in London, who asked me, so I've been media trained, and any tips that you need to give me on what I need to stick to? And he said, I've never told this to a person before. Please don't follow any of that. Answer the questions from your heart. Talk genuinely about why you're doing what you're doing, and I think your audience will find value in that. Now is not a time to bridge and communicate and pre-plan and figure out how to just deliver that message, but it's a time to answer questions genuinely. And that's probably the cue for any communicator at this point of time, to think through how you're going to use this to redefine your domain. So if I'm in the domain of public relations, when I'm back in 1996, when I began, and I was thinking of how to make this press release better, how to build a better experience at a press event, and there was no rule book. How to do a media accreditation. In those days, we had global acts coming to India. There were so many how-tos. We made it up as we went along. We tried, we failed, we learned. And I think that's the phase we are in right now. So be bold, take some risks, but if your intent is right, if you're doing it to share, to help, even if you make a mistake, I think you'll be forgiven. So yeah, I'm just super excited about what we as communicators can do right now.
I just want to take that question a little bit further. I'm putting you a little bit on the mat, I know, but what platforms do you think will emerge for leaders? Because to communicate, I'm strictly talking about, platforms of communication. Will it be video? Will it be Facebook? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So if you look at what I'm doing myself, is that I'm an introvert by nature, Varun. I don't like being on a camera, but all the sessions that I've hosted have been in the center, and yet I have had to find a way to keep myself on the sideline. So I think a leader has to adapt to what's working right now. So once the lockdown moves forward, I don't know whether there'll be as much time and attention online in terms of predictive viewing, but short form, meaningful content that helps. And that could be in anything. Like I'm experimenting along with you on podcasts, right? I'm so keen to learn how voice is going to grow. And so yes, I just downloaded the premium version of Spotify yesterday to play around with that. So yeah, so I'm experimenting. I don't know what's going to suit me. It has to be honest to me also. So I think each leader has to find their voice, and we've talked about this in the past about what's each person's voice, but it'll come from a place of integrity and honesty. You can see through immediately when somebody's just speaking prepared words, or if they've got something genuine inside that's bubbling up. Yeah.
Like you said, you have to be honest and true to yourself, but you have to find your voice. I think that's probably not a non-option anymore. You have to do that. You'll have to be out there a little bit more.
Yeah.
That was Nikhil Dey, Vice Chair of Weber Shandwick India, giving us literally a communication how to, for not only leaders, but also with employees, with ourselves, how do we really communicate and what will the new communication look like? Thank you, Nikhil, for joining us.
Great fun being with you as always, Parul. Thanks so much.